Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be with Johanne Morne today. She is the Executive Deputy Commissioner for the New York State Department of Health, has had a long career in public health. Before this, she was a Deputy Commissioner, Office of Health Equity and Human Rights for the New York State Department of Health. And throughout this long career, her priorities have always been the same. It's about advancing equity, social justice, and trauma informed care. Joanne, I'm so excited to have this conversation. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks to you for the invitation. Really glad to join you.
Joanne, we talk a lot about identity, and I'm curious, how do you identify and how has that shaped your career path?
Sure. I want to start by saying that I think identity is something that, at least for me, in my particular scenario, it has ebbed and flowed over the years. And one of the things people say to me all the time, so I'm 51, and I'm like, I love being 51. And people say, why? And I said, because it feels like one of the most significant times in my life where I feel my authentic self, right? I I'm to a degree unapologetic. I am who I am and I'm confident in that. And so I am confident when I talk about who I am and what makes up my background. I was really fortunate. I was blessed. I was raised by two really dynamic people, both immigrants to the US. My mother from the West Indies, my small island by the name of Dominica, my father from France. And so I grew up in a world of accents and culture and diversity. I identify and certainly recognize that I'm first generation American. I am a person of color. I am, you know, a woman that has been very fortunate to see so many aspects of the globe and the world and appreciate who people are and the tradition and culture that people bring. And so I have many titles, both professional and personal, and I hope that I do them all justice to the best of my ability.
It's beautiful. I have to go, Joanne, to this idea of 51 and how you're boldly like, I love this age, because often we think, oh, darn it, the back half of life, the midlife crisis, and then the back half of life, it's all like a downward doomsday. And
Yeah.
yet you stand here as a woman of color and say, I love this age. I love who I am now, and I'm stepping into it. I want to ask you, what was, I know it's never one thing, but if you could point to a shift, something you believed about yourself or something you dropped that was an old belief, could you point to any things that helped you get into this power? I'm 51 proud. Here I go.
Yeah. I think there are a number of things. First of all, I have to point to my faith, my family, my friends, right? And so having a really tight support circle, and being surrounded by people that have loved me through all the forms of me. But I also want to point to life experience. At the age of 42, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was one of those classic situations, right? I scheduled a mammogram. It was in October, right? Which is the month where we talk all about the pink ribbons and breast cancer awareness and prevention. And there were other individuals who should have had their screenings as well. And so in an effort to motivate others to go and get a screening, I scheduled my screening. And I knew that there was something significant that was going to be happening for me because during the screening, the technician said, if not once, at least 20 times, a lot of times people get a call on Monday. So I waited for Monday, and sure enough, the call came. And so my diagnosis came, that journey started. And it was also at a time in my life professionally where there was a bit of transition that was happening too. And it was supposed to be a dynamic transition that really sort of took me to the next level of my career. And so I had to, in that moment, think about, how do I prioritize my personal experience in my medical journey and the professional experience that I had worked really hard toward and wanted to pursue, and ask the question: is it an either or? And I decided no. I decided that cancer impacted my life enough that if I allowed it to be an either or, it would be too significant, um, a loss and a resentment for me. And so I pursued both. And I'm not going to say every day was easy, but I had some tremendous support. And so, went through the cancer journey. I'm 10 years, cancer free. Yeah, yeah. And I have to say, one of the things about cancer is a lot of times we focus on the cancer, right? And so there's a thought that if we have the surgery or we have the treatment, we're cancer free, that okay, that is completed. But what we don't talk about with cancer is that it's always present to some degree, whether it's psychological, emotional, and or through other forms of physical manifestation. So for some who perhaps have chemotherapy, they may be experiencing with lifelong neuropathy. For some who, like myself, had radiation, they may be experiencing lifelong other aches and pains that come with that. So I say that to make the point that when you have someone in your life, in your midst, who is that has that diagnosis, to know that for that person, it doesn't end at the point of being told you are cancer free. So what that did for me was it built a resilience and it gave me courage. I think that, in my life, I have always worked from a place of integrity. And as you noted in my background, looking at those opportunities of social justice, I think what having that cancer diagnosis did was really sort of strengthen for me that, like, I can be louder and I can be more fully present, and that's okay. And I can agree that at times I'm not going to always agree with those around the table, but that my space at the table isn't any smaller because of that. And those are things that I think from the point of diagnosis to where I sit today, it really grew in me and it strengthened me. And it gave me sort of the ability to recognize that I have a purpose and a role, and I have to continue to pursue that even when it's at the hardest times of life.
I'm getting chills, Joanne, because often it feels like a choice. I need to prioritize my health because that's the only way I'm going to survive. Or look, I've worked so hard over decades to get to this point to really get that big role. Let me focus on that.
Yeah.
And yet, I love this question that it's not an either or, that you can do both. And it sounds like, Joanne, you're really deep in your legacy, your purpose, and that allowed you then to say, be louder. Because I want to talk about that because it sounds so beautiful, right? Okay, Joanne rises from the ashes. Here she is, big role. She's doing podcasts, doing talks. And what does that mean? What does it mean to play your bigger game, be louder? What did you do? What did you say?
Yeah.
Did you take any risks? Talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. 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 Life is about risk taking, right? And I think that, again, following my experience in my early 40s, I really sort of claimed that, and that, you have to take calculated risks. You have to think about, so the what ifs, right? Like, so if I do this and this happens, can I stand by those decisions that I've made? And the opportunities such as the one you're offering me here today, and being able to get out into larger spaces to talk about not only my experience, but to talk about through my professional work and areas of my passion, the pursuit, the advancement, and the prioritization that we have to give around health equity, the conversations that we have to have about disparities, and it's interesting. I did a presentation the other day, and afterwards I was asked if I, would be willing to answer a few questions. And one of the questions that I was asked was, the individual commented that I weave a lot of humor into my presentation, which is really about very serious things, right? If we're talking about equity, that means we're having a conversation about disparities. If we're talking about disparities, that means that there are a group of individuals that are not given the same points of access and the same level of resources that others are. And as a result of that, their health and their life is not able to achieve in the same way as some others, right? The privileges that many of us have are not present. And so they said, you know, how did that start for you? And how do you find and know when it's okay to give that little joke? And part of what I talked about was it's about being present in the space and looking around you and understanding what people need. There is a lot that's going on in our world today. And I'm sure if we talked to every single generation, they would say there was a lot going on in their world that day, right? And so you have to create a balance of knowing that we're in the midst and we have the opportunity to really impact and change significant things in the space that we hold. And with that, we also need to have those moments of levity and put it into a space where it can become as manageable as possible. Professionally, if we don't do that, we're going to experience burnout. Personally, if we don't do that, we're going to experience despair. And when you experience despair, that means you are lacking in hope. And if we don't have hope, I don't know how we continue to advance.
I hear you say, I'm going to make a stand. I'm going to bring up the difficult stuff, which means there's real disparity and real inequity, very uncomfortable, hard issues.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring it to allow us to have hope with levity and crack the joke. Honestly, Joanne, I don't hear a lot of levity when we're talking DEI, right? It's like, here's super unfair graphs. Look at people are dying and children are going to prison. They're set up to go to prison. I mean, it's just like so dark. And so I can see that while risky, because it's not often not done to bring humor and levity, I can see how it's so necessary. I mean, you can see that people are shying away from DEI now because it's like, that was last year. That's just so old school. And yet we need to bring it back. And how can we? So this is so beautiful. Because it's about humanity, right? It's about humanity. And I know that's heavy. And at the same time, here's an example. I would love to hear, do you mind if you have like a hip pocket, like here's something funny, or here's a funny analogy. If you have one in the hip pocket that you might remember.
So, what I could say to you is this. So one of the things you brought up, DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the fact that, we're beginning to see some very huge organizations that have status within our communities, right? I'm not going to name names, but moving away from DEI, right? And so when you think about that, when something is so big and so important, and all of a sudden it's sort of pulled back, part of what that tells you is that it was never fully intentionally, authentically integrated into the culture, right? Because it was so easy to sort of say, nope, we're not going to invest there. So one of the things that I often will talk about is the fact that during COVID, if you went on LinkedIn, you saw all these jobs, right? It was like chief equity officer, diversity leader, DEI, I don't know, director, all of these big titles, right? That suddenly came. And I remember I would look at them, I'd be like, all right, this isn't going to be here in a year. All right. And then at the time, the commissioner of health here at the department was Dr. Mary Bassett, and Dr. Bassett, as you know, anyone who doesn't know Dr. Bassett should Google Dr. Bassett because she has a lot to offer. Her real focus and prioritization is health equity. And so under Dr. Bassett's leadership, the Office of Health Equity and Human Rights was established in the Department of Health in 2022. And then guess what? Suddenly I had one of those titles. So I was like, oh, well, you know what, girl, you were talking about these are not sticking around. You better figure out how to make it stick.
Like those jobs. Shoot.
Yeah.
Damn, I have one of those jobs. You know what? There's a lot of real reason for I love
Yeah, we better make this stick. All right.
So
and so, it's that kind of levity. It's not like it's not like I'm sitting at home figuring out my stand-up. It all comes from the space and the energy in the room. And sometimes it just comes from being honest. For me, a good comedian is a comedian that talks about actual life experience because it is funny. It
Mhm,
can be funny.
mhm.
Sometimes it's funny in a way that just it feels like, is this real? Like I say all the time, I'm showing my age, but I'll say all the time, no, there's no way we're being punked or we're on candid camera. Only some will understand that reference, but you know, sometimes you just can't imagine that this is really what's in front of you. So you have to create space for that. And it doesn't mean that there aren't moments and experiences in our lives that are any less hurtful, frustrating, um, you know, or demeaning. It you have to have those feelings too. And you have to acknowledge those moments too. But you also have to create a balance for yourself.
Joanne, I want to talk about hope because it's sadly, we really need more hope.
Yeah, we do.
And whatever happens with politics or the world and a lot of tragedy, and you do a lot of trauma informed care as part of your legacy and what you want to bring to the world. What does it mean? Because it's part of health, right? Not just physical health, mental health,
Sure.
community. You talked about that as one of the reasons that you were so resilient is to rely back on your faith and community. Can you talk about health in your daily life, how you bring that as a leader for a huge organization? How does that look in Joanne's leadership for your people and also for yourself to
Yeah.
remember that there's hope in this hard work that you do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that no, you have to have hope. Again, in my opinion, if we don't have hope, then more often than not, you see despair.
Mhm.
And when you are given the opportunity to sit in seats that can impact change, you not only have to have hope within yourself, right? Remembering that we too are human, but you have to be able to exhibit that hope for other people. I think it's really easy for us to fall to a space where we say like, ah, people are apathetic. Oh, people don't care. Oh, people da da da. I don't buy into any of that. The same way I don't buy into when people say like, oh, well, that individual is hard to reach. No, they're not. That individual isn't hard to reach. Either A, that individual is not in a space where they're ready to be reached, which is their decision, or B, we're not doing what the individuals need in order for them to have access to us, right? We make assumptions. It's easy to say, no, there's health access everywhere across New York State. There are a lot of health facilities across New York State. That doesn't mean they're accessible to everyone for any number of reasons. So what do you do? Uh, Number one, I'm a big, big proponent of EQ. Emotional intelligence, in my opinion, is one of the most significant ways in which a leader can lead in a sustainable way, can develop organizational culture and expectation. Caring about and considering the impact of the work that we do on the people that we do it with on a daily basis has to be a part of the leadership platform in order for us to succeed. And especially after responding to a pandemic, the pandemic brought significant change into the spaces, at least that I sit in, right? In healthcare and in public health. Significant change as far as our understanding of how quickly, in spite of all the work that we do to make sure that we create infrastructure for care, how quickly that can collapse. It demonstrated how quickly a workforce can be transitioned, thinking about the number of people who left our fields for both personal and professional reasons. And it also demonstrated our resiliency because very quickly we started to do things we had never done before. I always say COVID made the impossible possible. COVID had many things that we can point to that were devastating, but it also made the impossible possible, things that were like, no, we can't do that. We had to do. And it turned out to be good. A really simple example. How many people listening today now work remotely? whether it's 100%, 50%, whatever percent. Many of you were in spaces that once said, absolutely not, the work cannot be done remotely. It made the impossible possible. And that's a very simple example of how that was made. But looking as a leader, making sure that as much time is spent on considering the needs of the team as we spend on thinking about how we advance in our work and in our outcomes is significant.
Completely
People
agree.
want to feel valued.
I mean, the people that we serve are important, but as important are the people who we get to serve as leaders. And
Right.
I love this holistic look because it doesn't have to be who's more important or are you being selfish, when actually all of us in this work together are, yes, grinding it out, but also having a ton of hope and support for each other that
Absolutely.
allows us to sustain. Because often it's
Yeah.
just like one way, which, you know, with white
Absolutely.
dominant culture, you got to burn through. And I'm like, actually, there's another way to do it where we can care for ourselves, our personal lives, each other, and it's hopeful. And I appreciate COVID was hard. You know, because you were leading through it, and yet there was some good things that came out of it, including this ability to, as mothers, as parents, as caregivers, as just people, to be able to have flexibility to care for ourselves and our families.
Right.
So I appreciate that so much.
Perspective is huge in this conversation. I say it all the time. Everything is temporary. What's good is temporary. What's bad is temporary. Me in the seat is temporary. Life is temporary, right? Some people have a lifetime of 100+ years. Beautiful. Other people have shorter lifespans. It's all temporary. So in that temporary space, let's maximize all the things that we can do that can actually result in good.
That is a mic drop, Joanne. Thank you so much for this and just empowering ourselves to feel like whatever age we are and whatever life circumstance, we can see that it is temporary. And so, how do we embrace the beautiful? Because if we don't, gosh darn, there's darkness to it. So, let's turn to the light, bring our teams to light, bring our community to light. So appreciate this leadership style. Joanne, are you ready for lightning round questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Cooking or takeout?
Takeout.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
Climb a mountain.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
No.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
Oh, I'm gonna give my you said Mariah Carey a 10. It's all about presence. It's all about presence.
What's a book you read recently or in the past that you like?
Well, unfortunately, I don't read as much as I would love to. Of course, I'm blanking on the title, but I'm going to tell you the author's name, and that author is Wally Lamb. Wally Lamb wrote a book about twins, and oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name. But if it's not been read, read it.
I will write it down. I'll find it. Do not worry, but love the recommendation. Joanne, tell me, what is one of the professional developments you've done that you've loved?
Actually, so glad we're doing this week. Just this week, I had the chance to speak on it. It's the Minority Leadership Program. That is a program that originated by NASTAD. So NASTAD is a national organization that represents HIV, hepatitis C, and other public health areas, particularly in the advancement of health equity. They facilitate this program, and it is for individuals who are identified as persons of color, and working to, one, help and discuss some of the challenges of being a person of color within our organizations, but two, really help to discuss what's needed in order for advancement in leadership.
We need that. We need that. I love that you're advocating for that. Yeah. Joanne, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my goodness, say this to myself all the time. I would have told my younger self to calm down. Calm down, like, just stop. Everything's okay, you know? I think about my younger self and how I would just, like, just really make myself overwhelmed with wanting perfection,
Mhm.
right? Or and wanting to do it all and be all these things to all these people. And you know what? I probably wouldn't change anything on my journey, because if I did, I wouldn't be where I am today. However, I definitely would tell myself, calm down, stay out late that extra hour. Don't worry about getting up to have to go to work or go to school or whatever it is you had to do.
Beautiful advice. And then, Joanne, where can we find you? Like LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Sure. I'm on many of the social media platforms, but I am definitely on LinkedIn. And also the New York State Department of Health has multiple areas in social media, including Facebook, Instagram, X, otherwise known as Twitter, uh, and LinkedIn.
Great. And then last question, do you have a final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts to share?
I want to tell everyone to, or encourage everyone to take the risk. You know, it's cliche, but we know that it's true. If we don't ask, we won't know the answer, and that means we won't know what opportunity could have been. So, you know, when you think about doing things that, and it's like, no, that just seems so far out of reach. Maybe reverse that by saying, so let me see what's in reach, and let me see what can be available to me. I'm always astounded. I came to state government with I this just briefly, I came to state government, I applied for a position. I never thought I would get hired. I didn't think state governments hired community people. I got the job. I got a provisional appointment. I was supposed to be here 2 years. It's 18 years later. Through those years, I have advanced. And I say all of that to say it's not because of anything I did that was so magical. There are incredibly brilliant people all over this globe. I say it to say that I never would have imagined where I sit today when I was working in my community-based organizations on the street, doing the work, doing the outreach. And I value those experiences. I value this experience. And I imagine that I'll have more experiences in my journey as I move forward. So, you know, it is a never say never.
Beautiful. Joanne, thank you so much for your stories, your wisdom, bringing hope back into the world, especially now. I so appreciate you and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And thanks for creating the space for these conversations. We need this right now. We need this always, actually. And so it's an incredible way to connect. Thank you.